So I'm Jason Beta Shop. You might see me, the guy with the chef hat on Farcaster. Been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I've started 7 companies. I've had my fair share of successes. Also experienced failure. I've had one company that had a fantastic exit, and then another company that was a unicorn overnight, and then came crashing down, got crushed by Amazon. Lots of stories to tell. A lot of kind of kind of battle scars. Been on Farcaster since the beginning, number 602. Immediately took to the platform, really thought that this could be kind of the foundation for decentralized social. And with Moxie, we saw an opportunity after, building in Farcaster and building on chain for many years. We saw an opportunity, over the summer this year. So I guess started in like March, really focusing on in earnest, but like by the summer of this year, to basically the convergence of things that we've been working on from 2016. Like 2016, we started outlining what like the future of like the creator economy and on-chain social and social fi could be. And it was way too soon, but we saw like with like the convergence happening now with like things like Farcaster with base, like, so you have layer 2 that can scale and really help developers kind of like, accelerate really, really easily. And then like, better wallet technology, like all this things converging at the same time. And AI as well. And so like just time was right to launch Moxie end of July. And yeah, and we can go into wherever you want to take the conversation.
Yeah, great. So, and we've spoken before, but that I think is good context for people who are listening who may or may not be familiar with your background or the origin story on Moxie. But Moxie launched as like very much a Farcaster focused project, sort of a way to monetize various elements of the protocol, enabling fan tokens and channel tokens and things like this. What was like sort of the change from when you launched in July to this winter, basically like the last month, as it seems like you've sort
Yeah.
of expanded beyond Farcaster?
Yeah. I'd say a couple things is, if you go back to when we launched in July, Moxie was kind of like the only game in town when we launched. What I mean with that is like Degen had its run kind of earlier in the year, really peaked in the spring, was in kind of a slump over like the June, July time period. Farcaster itself was in a big slump as well from a user standpoint in that time period. And so Moxie hit, like we were kind of like the only kind of game for about like a month and a half. And like I wouldn't say want to take full credit for it, but we helped bring some life back into Farcaster practice. And some of it was like good, and some other things that needed kind of improvements. But like, but we were for I say like August, September, there was like Moxie everywhere. What we were trying to do is kind of really figure out how do you incentivize people to post high quality content, to build high quality frames. The basic foundational structure of Moxie is it's called fan tokens. So you basically could buy fan tokens of people and communities, brands that you admire, and those individuals and brands and communities can earn rewards through the protocol that would basically accrue to the value of their tokens. And so kind of creating these loops. And then what happened over the course of like, the fall and into the winter is obviously we had this explosion over the last few months where the space got really, really kind of crowded and noisy. We had kind of the meme coin kind of craze, and now we're into kind of AI coins. And what we did at Moxie is we really felt like our plan all along was to incubate on Farcaster and then kind of see where the market is as to when we should kind of expand beyond it. So we want to be really, really focused on just Farcaster to start. And we decided, I guess it was like mid-November, that we were going to accelerate our plans to, expand across, basically to bring, I call like bring everyone on chain, right? And to say like fan tokens are for everybody. And whether it's a fan token for your account on X, or your account on your GitHub, or your LinkedIn, or eventually even your TikTok, your Instagram, that we can blow this model out in a major way and kind of really show people kind of the power of kind of like the fan token and the kind of fan to creator kind of economy. And so we really hustled to launch, we call it like kind of expand on base by the end of the year. It was actually 15 days ago that we did kind of our full base launch, which as like during the holiday season, like it is just gone like crazy. I mean, like what's happened over the last 15 days has just exceeded, all of our expectations. So we started enabling people to basically to launch a fan token for any account on X, any account that you own. We create a structure where you go on the Moxie website and you can like sign up using those accounts. You also build a Moxie score by kind of connecting all your on-chain and off-chain accounts. And what's happened is, so in the last 15 days, over 18,000 profiles have been created on Moxie. And like to put in perspective, like I was early on Farcaster, but like still Farcaster existed for like a year before I got on and I was number 602. And like, it took Farcaster like 18, 24 months to get to, 18,000 profiles. We had 18,000 profiles in 15 days on Moxie. And frankly, we couldn't have done that without our experience first on Farcaster and without having built the community and the audience. But I'd say what really happened is like, that was one catalyst of it. The other catalyst of it was that, I mean, just getting out there on base and just enabling anyone, essentially like base is doing fantastic. So like, base equals like rocket fuel for startups. And so just being associated with base and be able to kind of create your fan token and your Moxie account for your representing basically on base and representing your on-chain activity on base plus your off-chain socials. That was like one thing appealed to a lot of people. But the other was just we were the first ones to really bring AI to Twitter in a way where anyone can launch basically create your Moxie account, create a fan token for yourself or for someone else with their permission on X without ever even leaving X. So essentially what we created is this, you basically tweet at the Moxie AI and say, hey, I'd like to have you're going to create my fan token. It creates it for you. And then you go to Moxie afterwards and you log in with your Twitter. And then basically a wallet was already created with you. And we did this really cool stuff with Privy to enable that. And, so like what's happened is we've, 18,400 accounts have been created in the last 15 days. They're all rich profiles. And every single one of them has Web2 social and a Web3 on-chain wallet. So I think that's a pretty unique kind of combination we've done. And we looked at the data in the last 7 days, over 80% of the signups are coming from X. And so it's like the first point of signup is logging in with X into Moxie to create their account. And then the wallets, attached and everything. So we had this mantra, like we're going to be bringing the world on chain in 2025. And that's like what the flywheel that we're really kind of starting to build right now.
Interesting. So where's the other 20% besides the 80% from X? Is that still Farcaster or is that something different?
Yeah, it's people from Farcaster, go over and look, there's 108,000 Moxie token holders. We consider that separate. On Farcaster, before we launched on overall and base, there was like 6,000 like people that were really participating in Moxie every single day. But like not every one of those created a profile on Moxie website, which you had to do in addition. Like what we're counting with this 18,400 is literally they went on the Moxie website and created a profile, or they did it through X. So like there's a lot of other Farcaster users who are still adopting Moxie every day who were using Moxie before. This is entirely new people in the last 15 days who've gone to the Moxie website and created an account. And so like it's been staggering, for us to see this in the first, during the holiday period. I mean, it's like, we launched a base economy fan coin, which is like, it's a fan coin that gets 10% of all rewards earned on base. We have this thing of base rewards we can talk about, but it captures 10% that goes to the fans of that fan coin. That's now a $500,000 market cap fan coin, which I know isn't like the millions or tens of millions of dollars of meme coins, but this isn't a meme coin. This is actually something that is like real value to the holders of it. And it continues to accrue value. It's like, it never has a bad week. Like it always keeps growing as long as more people are kind of playing the game. And so it's just been an awesome last couple of weeks, frankly. Just like really thrilled as where things are going.
Yeah, I'd be curious your perspective on the difference between like how you look at base and Farcaster. Like one sort of mental model I've had for them is that because I don't know, I'm sure you've sort of looked at a bunch of stats and whatnot, but last I checked, in terms of like the primary primary blockchain on which people are transacting, L2 or L1, of like Farcaster users, it's pretty astounding. It's like 90% plus last I checked
Yeah.
are on base. And so when I think of Farcaster, I think of it as a circle pretty much inside of a larger base circle. And there's a tiny sliver of it that sort of exists outside of the base circle, if you think of it as like sort of a little bit of a Venn diagram. But like the base circle is bigger, the Farcaster circle is smaller, and the Farcaster circle is 90% within the base circle. And then I
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
like, so that's sort of like, where do those ecosystems lie in general? Like, how do they intersect and overlap? But then I think about like the personas, the demographics, whatever you want to call it, on each. And I'm like, there's this sort of like big base ecosystem. And when you're on Farcaster and you're sort of Farcaster native, like I think you and I both are, we're both on Twitter as well, but I think both of us probably are spending more time on Farcaster, or at least, you might be spending a lot of time on Twitter these days with the launch,
Yeah.
but in general,
Well,
over the last like year or two, it's
yeah.
safe to say you've spent more time on Farcaster.
I will think, see what happened. So I went Farcaster native almost right away. I was very like down on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, like once Elon bought it, and it was unclear like where things were going. But I think then reality kind of settled in over the last few months. So I think first of all, the election was a watershed event. One of the first things I actually wrote a strategy memo to our team and to our board, where I wrote like what the election was the day after the election, and I was like what the election means. And I said there's a couple of things we just have to hold as truths now, right? And one of them is, thankfully, like it's going to be a lot friendlier, regulatory, government wise, to be in crypto, and so we can do some things we were maybe afraid to do before, or more cautious about. And then the second is like X is where crypto Twitter, crypto, the conversation is going to live. And, the election basically, kind of not just revitalized, but kind of like completely kind of like reborn a whole new kind of X. And with the bull market plus, kind of X being the focus, the reality is like, if we might have thought a year ago that we had a shot of kind of bringing all of crypto Twitter over to Farcaster, I don't think that's the realistic kind of play right now in Farcaster. I think there's other plays for Farcaster that are interesting. But that I think is the reality we live in. So what we did is we pivoted to X, right? Because if we said, if there's this, we love Farcaster, and there's lots of things that you can do in Farcaster that you can't do on X, especially, you don't have an embedded wallet on X, and you can't transact on X, and you can't build apps into X. But we have to live in reality and say, in reality, all the people are on X and the conversations have on X, and they're not moving right now just because of those things. And so we got to meet people where they are, is a really kind of the approach that we took, and live in reality, not live in like the kind of the place where we want the world to be. And so we did kind of a pivot to X, but also we said, okay, if the Venn diagram, as you were saying, of like Farcaster is very high overlap with base, but the Venn diagram of base is much more overlap with X than it is with Farcaster. It's like Farcaster is a small little circle inside of base, but it's like, almost almost everyone on Farcaster uses base, but the inverse is like, let's say overall users of base, like only 1% are on Farcaster, are active on Farcaster, right? So we got to go.
Do you think that 1% number, like, is that something you've seen data for, or are you just like guessing, like roughly?
Well, it's just, if you look at like overall base usage and you look at the apps that are being used and the transactions that they're happening, it's just orders of magnitude. It's probably less than 1%. I mean, just like people who are transacting on Aerodrome, on Kyber, on 1inch, on Matcha, on Uniswap, on various games. Very few of them are actually active on Farcaster. Like what the world we live is of the people who are probably the creators or builders who, but the users are not. The users are, if you want to reach them, they're on X. And that's just the reality of the world. And there's no way, like the active Farcaster user base on a given day is in like the low tens of thousands. The active, number of transacting users on base is, many orders of magnitude, greater than that. And so like literally we had 9,900, almost 10,000, transactions from, like a few thousand users, yesterday on Moxie alone on base. And we know that, most of those are not people who are active on Farcaster.
Yeah, it's interesting. that is something that is a departure from like what I had in my head in terms of the split of base. Like I think of base and the one thing that stands out, which you just sort of alluded to, is that it seems like there's a disproportionate number of builders on base who are on Farcaster. But the users, to your point, the quantity is on X still. I sort of joke that like there might actually be like sort of too many builders on Farcaster where like everyone is building something for everyone else there who is also a builder, and it's just like that's not the right balance for an ecosystem where like apps actually get used because like everyone's like pretty busy like building and whatnot.
Yeah.
So your
Well,
experience of
yeah.
expanding to X has been that not only is that like unlocking another half or 3x or whatever number of users, but that's actually like 99% user base sort of thing when it comes to like people who are transacting on base, and you feel that it's like that much larger of an opportunity basically.
Yeah, and look, we're seeing in the numbers too. Like we're seeing so many accounts now where like the account creation, the OAuth, the first way they log in is with X, not with Farcaster, which is a good thing actually, because when they join Moxie, it also gives us an opportunity to introduce them to Farcaster. So we have within Moxie, there's various ways that you earn rewards, and very prominent is the way that you build your scores and earn rewards by using Farcaster. And so we are seeing increasingly as well, like people who like come to Moxie and they start off with the only thing you see in their profile is an X account. And then you see they also now have a Farcaster account. So like we're all in this ecosystem. We're all trying to bring the world on chain. And if we can get people who, are on chain for the first time because of us, that's great. If we can get people who are using base for the first time because of us, that's great. If we can get people who are checking out Farcaster for the first time because it's also great. If we can get people who maybe created a Farcaster account, ignored it, and now we're coming back and trying again, that's great. Overall, we just want the whole freaking pie to grow, right? Yeah. So that's like, so it's like that. And I think also the notion of what is a social network also needs to change a bit. Like Farcaster is like what we've all thought about as the social network, the social graph, and it is to a certain extent over the last couple of years. But like Moxie is now a social network too, and it has a large number of users very quickly, and we have people buying each other's tokens and copy trading. Clanker is like its own social network in some ways. Interface is a very large social network, and so I think we have to think through like the definition of a social network doesn't necessarily mean posting text updates to your friends on a social graph like it was in Web 2. It means all sorts of new things and new primitives in the on-chain Web 3 model.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you guys like sort of started down this path of expanding to X, expanding to base, was it difficult? Was there anything that you guys sort of baked in from day one in building like the OG Moxie that made it challenging or more challenging than it would have been had you started from a blank slate? Or was it fairly easy to sort of adapt things towards this more global, base-wide model?
I'm going to say no and yes. And I'll put it this way. It's like, so we had a lot of internal debates when we first launched about, do we launch Farcaster only or make it more open? And the argument, that won out was let's launch Farcaster only, so that we're within like, be a big fish in a small pond before you try to be something larger. And so what we did is we put some arbitrary restrictions in the protocol, but we built them in a way that which they could always be lifted. Thankfully, right? So thankfully we didn't like hardwire anything entirely. So an example is we had a restriction that essentially it was like a way to say, in order to play Moxie in the beginning, you had to be a Farcaster member. And the way we did that is you had to have a Moxie Pass soulbound NFT, so non-transferable to someone else in order for you to, basically use the Moxie protocol. And the only place we allowed you to mint that soulbound Moxie Pass was in a frame on Farcaster. So that kind of like said, okay, that was a way just to ensure that we were kind of Farcaster native and specific to start. So we lifted that restriction, a couple of weeks ago when we launched on base, and basically, and then another is we had built a restriction in that didn't allow kind of person-to-person transfers of fan tokens. So you always had to send a fan token. So a fan token is a derivative of Moxie. You basically put Moxie in a smart contract, you get a fan token. And the way we set up at first was that you couldn't skirt around the no Farcaster only or create secondary markets, whatever it is, by sending fan tokens to other people. You had to always go back to the contract first, and so we also limited that a couple weeks ago as well, to kind of open up. And I'd say one thing that's a little more, so those are kind of like the easier to kind of, we kind of cleaned up over the last couple of weeks. A little more, so I'm saying more challenging one that we're still working our way through is things like, so when the initial bonding curves that fan tokens are on were not very steep in their slope, we didn't want Moxie to be perceived as overly speculative, which in hindsight was a mistake. And frankly, some of that thinking was we wanted people really focused on the utility of fan tokens, less than just the kind of monetary speculation. We really focused on creating more, like the focus being create more utilities for fans, create more utility for fans. And then what happened over the last couple months is, and like basically, speculation became rampant, and like, so you have to be in that game. And like, why do I want to trade a fan token that appreciates, let's say, 30% a month if I can get lucky with a meme coin and get 30% in an hour or a day. And then also the regulatory climate became a little more open as well. So there's less fear of it. Okay, you created something that are purely speculative instruments. And so, but once you launch a bonding curve, they're not upgradable, right? So you can't upgrade the bonding curve once it's, you can do it by some things that we're working on right now. And so since we launched on base, we've created different slopes of bonding curves that new users have been able to launch with. And now we're in a process of going through a way that the old users could opt in to upgrade their bonding curve to be more aggressive if they want to. So we're working our way through that right now. Just as an example.
Yeah. Is there any consideration on that slope of the bond curve example towards, maybe like, obviously it's hard to watch certain, meme coins, AI coins, whatever it might be, go up, 100x in a week or whatever it is. But like, the majority that do stuff like that end up going down 100x or
right.
down 99% as well. Like, is there any consideration to, like, it sounds like you sort of going back would have liked to have increased the slope of the bonding curve, but we also saw stuff like this with, I don't know, like an older example that comes to mind for me is like BitClout had like a pretty steep bonding curve, and then like, everyone went up really fast and everyone went down really fast and then it was dead. I think there is an argument for a, a lesser slope. But have you sort of like done the math on all that and all things, considered, you still think a stronger slope is, or a steeper slope is, better?
I'd say that, like, let me put it this way. So the bonding curve, there's like shape and slope. So like, is it, exponential? Is it logarithmic? Exponential is like the Frentech, the kind of one that you mentioned as well, is like, that's like, just like literally just like straight up, like very exponentially. We'd gone with a logarithmic kind of bonding curve. And then within that, the original Moxie bonding curve was fairly flat to the point where we just launched like the new one we called, like, the options called based versus conservative or moderate for your slope. And our based version is still, while it's 10x more aggressive than our conservative one, it's still orders of magnitude less than Frentech's most mild one. So we're kind of threading a needle here. We don't think it should be purely speculative, because we are working on some insane utility for fan token holders and creators using AI specifically. And we really want that to be the driving force over time. Like the rewards and kind of pure speculation is like seeding all this. And then kind of the plan still is like, make it like there's utility value in holding being someone's fan. And that's the stuff we're still very much focused on delivering. So that's threading that needle is super important. But
yeah, so that makes sense. So you're sort of meeting in the middle. Like, I didn't realize quite how conservative the original model was, and so you're not going all the way towards a Frentech or something, but just
we laugh at ourselves now when we look at the original one. We're like, oh my god, what were we thinking? It's like,
well, it makes sense. You guys weren't thinking about really speculative reasons to own at all. It sounds like you were really focused on the utility, and the only way to sort of discourage the speculation, I feel like, is if you don't reward it, basically.
Exactly. And then you get, it's like threading the needle. Like, then you're in a market where like everyone is speculating. And in that same
Yeah.
memo that I talked about earlier about like our strategy after the election, you know, I wrote in that memo, I said, look, my prediction is we're going to be entering a bull market. That bull market could be anywhere from like 6 months to 18 months. And in a bull market, which is the kind of just face facts that like speculation is utility, right? Like making money is a utility in a bull market. And so you have to be, while you're building other utilities as well, people are going to gravitate towards things that they can make money on and get value from at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so actually sort of related question, something I think about a bit that I don't really have like an answer for. I just think it's an interesting question more than anything else, which is for any really like for basically any tokens or coins, like how do you think about the value that is sort of attributable to speculation versus utility? I don't expect you to have like some sort of like sophisticated, like, you know, concrete answer necessarily, but it's interesting. Like in this case, for example, like there's basically there are some coins that don't, you know, pose to offer any or claim to offer any, you know, utility whatsoever. It's just like a, you know, dog with a hat or whatever,
Yep.
or, you know, a baby hippopotamus. And then there's, you know, then there's coins that do claim to offer utility or that they will offer utility in the future, but seemingly the valuation of the token for some of these things gets to a point where like it's clearly beyond, you know, the utility that exists or really that could possibly exist. It seems that there's like sort of a meme slash like speculative, you know, premium on it, and that premium may be well like worth well more than, you know, as a percentage of the market cap, that might be like well more than the sort of utility piece of it. And there's also, I think, a reasonable argument to be made that in some cases, utility actually almost serves as like a ceiling on the valuation, because with if it's purely speculative, purely a meme, whatever, then
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it just is, it's worth what people believe it's worth. And there's sort of, that is, you know, that can be whatever it is because we've got a dog with a
Yeah.
hat
Yeah.
that's worth two
Yeah.
billion or whatever.
Yeah,
But
trust
if
me,
there's,
you know, it kills me sometimes when you see some of these things like, oh my God, we work so hard to create something people want to use, and we actually have great usage. And then like someone's like, you know, they kind of like valuing this kind of like shit coin, nothing coin, whatever it is, just, but
right.
that's part of the game. And I think what it is a couple of things. One is there's meme coins are great at like capturing kind of like the zeitgeist, the vibe of the moment, their branding. I think we're going to see meme coins become much more about branding moments and events and kind of moods and attitudes and vibes. And then there's things that are like really like driving utility platforms. And then the kind of the blending of the two is like that sweet spot where it's like it's speculative but utility. And like if you look at like I think so if you look at what happened over the last few months, you had like Pump.Fun didn't it was, basically was the story. Like there were two stories of 2024. It was Polymarket and Pump.Fun. And Pump was, you know, was the story, but now Pump's been very quickly overshadowed by virtuals and AI16Z. And what's going on with both those is like, okay, these are speculative instruments that like the coins that are being created on virtuals, they look like almost like VC investments. It's like, you don't know which of these are going to work. You're betting on like a little bit about the team and what the concept is, but you build a basket of them because if one of them works, it basically pays back like the entire kind of portfolio. It very much reminds me of like early stage VCs, what's happening in virtuals right now. So you have that combination of like people are building utilities and it's super hyper speculative because it's so early, you don't know which one's going to work. And so it's kind of a perfect storm is what that one is right there.
Yeah, virtuals is a good example, I guess, of one of these things that's like you see a bit about it on Farcaster, but it's really that's happening almost purely, I would say, in the base ecosystem outside of the Farcaster subcircle. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then if I saw someone yesterday who hadn't like, had never seen a Farcaster before, is like a new, and they're like, why isn't everyone talking about virtuals here? Cause that's where I think, you know, you see like, Woj, he's been talking about this, like, if Farcaster is really going to be the town square for, let's say, you know, things happening on chain or things just happening on base, the number of topics and, you know, like diversity and density of topics that are discussed needs to, you know, multiply by like, you know, hundreds X, thousands X. Like, but essentially it's like, there's like a conversation at a time on Farcaster that's not very deep and not very interesting for the most part, no offense, but And then you go over to X, and like, if you want to like dive into virtuals, if you want to learn about AI 16Z, if you want to learn about the competitors of them, it's happening in the moment right now.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I see what you're saying, and like certainly there's just way more volume on everything and every dimension on X. Um, but I think the it's hard for me to say because I don't spend quite as much time like digging into some of these things on X, but it feels like there might be more sort of like explainer threads that are like kind of clickbaity and whatnot, and like people who are sort of their job is to like dissect these things on a daily basis, and like that's fine. And I feel like you can find that on X for like basically anything, including a whole laundry list of coins or projects that are just kind of like, I don't know, pretty low quality basically. And obviously they exist for the high quality, like the virtuals as well. Like I said, I would prefer to have had like a lot more exposure to content about virtuals probably, because to your point, that is sort of like maybe one of the biggest things on base right now. And I haven't really had that exposure on Farcaster, but also I'm sort of protected from a bunch of exposure to a bunch of crap that I don't really care about. And I feel like some of the, like DGen, for example, one of the biggest uh, market cap coins on base was Farcaster first, obviously. Obviously got the attention, beyond Farcaster as well. But like, there's been no shortage of sort of like talk around DGen, and the same could be said for Moxie as well. Obviously, I'm sure there's X content going on now, but like Farcaster will sort of see these new things. Clanker being another one, like it'll see these new things. It will be the talking point. And to your point, it's kind of like it feels like there's one talking point sometimes. But I
Yeah.
do feel like the same is kind of true on X. Like, the old meme about like the current thing, which was kind of crazy. Like we have this huge global,
Yeah.
communications
Yeah.
network,
Yeah.
and somehow we're all talking about one thing like every day. So I think there's some sort of human nature to that. And maybe the problem is more like if there to the extent that there is a problem. I think it all sort of comes down to
Yeah.
we just need like sort of more people on
Yeah.
Farcaster at the end
But
of the day. But
yeah,
go.
but the Clanker thing is funny too, though, because not funny, but like interesting. Like, first of all, kudos to the team, like amazing job, right? And like they just nailed it. And but if you look at like, so Clanker became the thing on Farcaster. Why? Because everyone was suddenly making money and front running the rest of the market. And so it's like we might like talk all like cute and like Heidi Flighty that like Farcasters like about real substance and not about
Not
speculation.
about the money.
Bullshit, right? Like
Yeah,
bullshit.
yeah.
Like literally, like the whole thing that took off because everyone in Farcaster suddenly figured out a way to make money, and what they did with Clanker was front run everyone else. That's literally what they did, right? And
Right.
then the reason why Clanker has kind of had like a little kind of slowdown is because like, people figure out how to game that too, right? Just the front run. So you have the snipers. And now everyone's like, okay, well, yeah, I don't want to I don't want to lose the snipers, but I can go play virtuals as like a lone mini VC. So like everything moves in waves here. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, this whole sort of we don't care that much about money sort of notion. I hear you that it's something that sort of seems to be a bit of a thing on Farcaster, but I actually feel like that was and has been sort of a part of the base um, you know, culture or whatever you want to call it for, since base has existed, that it's not that, we don't care about money. But it's like Solana, like there's no question, these people on Solana, they want to make money, and there's like no shame. There's no, it is what it is. And I don't think there should be shame. Like it just,
Yeah.
people want to make money.
Yeah.
People want to make money. It's great. And on base, I feel like from day one, and this is not like a critique as much as, it's just an observation that I feel like it's just been less money oriented. It's been more about, how many people can we bring on chain? What sort of things can we build on chain and all these things. And these things are good. But I think, with all of those things, they sort of distracted from what has to date been, the biggest draw to bring people into crypto, not necessarily on chain, but, buy their first Bitcoin, buy their first Ethereum, not like a full one, obviously, but, but buy pieces of these things, whatever. It's always been, for the vast majority of people, the first thing that brought them in the first place was like, oh, my friend made a bunch of money on this thing. I'm going to put some money in and see what happens. And then, you fast forward a few years, they've made a little money on the stuff. They started to dig in a little more. They started to naturally become, learn more about it and become more interested as a result of learning more about it because they hold a little bit. And then, maybe 3 years after buying their first piece of Bitcoin, um, they go and they get the Coinbase wallet app and they're actually like sort of transacting on chain
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
And that's sort of like the story. So like money as an entry, I think has been the thing for, again, not everyone, but, some people have got in it for art and they want to collect NFTs, whatever. But like even a large portion of those, it's still about the money. And so I think Base, in addition to Farcaster, like both of these sort of ecosystems are sort of making a turn right about now. And maybe it's because, like you said, we're sort of entering a bull market where, making money is sort of the thing historically, among other, cool utilities and whatnot. But I feel like both Base and Farcaster are finally like, you know what, like, let's stop like bashing making money. Like making money is kind of the point of a lot of this. And obviously we're hoping that we're going to do some other stuff as well. And that this is actually going to be valuable, not just like a giant casino. But, the casino is a part of this. And like, so we need to kind of embrace some of that. And so I think that both Base and Farcaster are sort of shifting towards that. And I think to your point, Clanker, in terms of the Farcaster side of things, was one of the first demonstrations of that, I feel.
I think a couple, I think you're spot on this. And like, this is something that I've talked to Jesse a lot. And then, like, I was so happy when I saw, he posted, I think end of the year is like one of his, like looking back on 2024, he said one of his observations was that he didn't appreciate, one of his learnings, but he didn't appreciate enough how much kind of trading and making money is just a critical aspect of onboarding people to crypto and getting people excited about crypto. And I think that like it's naturally come from like a builder's mentality. You think about like, bring people on chain, it means like use products, but like the entry point, because these products are all based on money, right? So the entry point is, is helping them see that, okay, your friend's making some money or someone's doing something that like, and it's okay. Right. And then I think the other thing I observed is Dan definitely came to DWR, definitely came to the same conclusion that I did right around the same time, right after the election. Was that like, that they, if it's a bull market, that, it's like, that's what's going to bring, that's people are going to talk about, and you got to embrace that, not shy away from it. And that also is like, I think Dan was afraid before. I was afraid before. I never talked about the token, never talked about value, never talked about, and because of the regulatory climate. And I think, it's kind of like after the Trump win, it was kind of like, okay, it's not that there's no rules anymore, but like, okay, it's a different environment, and you can, especially, if it's non-custodial wallets and users are making their own decisions, like you can talk about these things, more than you could more before. Now I do think, last one I'll say on this is, I think there's a very big difference between casino and investing. And with crypto, they blur together sometimes, but like some of the, and I'm not picking on Clanker. Clanker pumped out fun. To me, that's a lot of that's casino, right? It's like, you're basically just placing a bet on like some random event as to which one might, become like the meta for the moment, knowing that 99.99% of them are going to die over time. Virtuals is more like playing investor, right? Virtuals is saying, okay, I'm going to look, I'm betting on teams and products that I find are interesting, knowing some of them might not work, but these are actual products that I'm betting on, not just zeitgeist.
Yeah, I think even on Clanker, it's far more sort of product oriented than pump fun. I don't disagree with, your argument that a lot of both of them is more or less casino, more like sort of pure meme coins where most of them are going to die. But, some of the top coins on on Clanker, you think of like Anon, where they just released like a client. Before that, they had Anon cast.
I'm going to talk out of school for a second though, because like I'm old, most people on Farcaster.
Sure.
Can I tell you this is like I'd say the third cycle that I've lived on, where every single cycle has some moment where everyone's excited about an anonymous social network. It happens every time, and it just it never wins out. Like there'll be some excitement about it. It'll have some like a moment of it, but like there's a reason why social networks are built around like personalities and real people, and like something else might come out of Anon, like we're at a ZK, but no, I'm gonna like say, Jason's gonna say, I've never said that publicly on Farcast. I'll say it is not going to be $1 billion kind of product, or even $100 million product around anonymous shit posting. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's I hear where you're coming from. I haven't seen as many cycles or as many attempts at this. I remain, cautiously optimistic that there will be some sort of anonymous social network. Not necessarily, but like to your point, most of these things, at least the ones that I've seen, sounds like the ones that you've seen, devolve into anonymous shitposting. And, um,
Yep.
I've seen this since back, I'm trying to remember the name of the thing, but when I was like in college, there was like, one of these things that like, everyone on campus could like, you know,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I
tweet
remember
anonymously.
in
Yeah.
2008, I was building social media, and then like the hype for like 3 months was suddenly like everyone was posting. I'm trying to remember the name of it, like this like anonymous, and it's probably the one before the one that you're talking about. This
Yeah.
anonymous, kind of like post that like, and it suddenly got a $500 million valuation because VC's like, okay, is this where it's going? But then it died, and then there was lots of them that were like around college students and stuff like that over the last few years. That happens in every cycle. But I think like if something Anon might play out as something interesting, but I don't think it's an anonymous social network. I think it's something else.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I appreciate the hot take, and it sounds like it's fairly well founded from what you've seen in the past. I haven't seen enough to be convinced that it's not going to happen. The one thing I will say that's related is that I have been sort of in a similar sense to what you're saying. Like, I've been surprised when I first got into crypto. Bitcoin was what got me into crypto, and uh, got into Ethereum a little bit after that, and like pretty much the only other project I got in like interested in at that early point was Zcash, and like it wasn't necessarily just Zcash, but Zcash as representing what is like sort of a more privacy oriented version of Bitcoin look like, because I think that really should and kind of needs to exist and like inevitably will exist. And I've been like, that's one of the most surprising things I would say that I've, experienced in crypto in the time that I've been involved is that there is no privacy coin that is massive. Like
Yeah.
I can't even like, it makes no sense to me. I don't really
Well,
understand it at all.
I think yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, you finish first.
I just say not to say like I never had, overwhelming conviction in Zcash in particular. I did have conviction in it, relatively. I'd very high conviction that there would be a very high valuation privacy coin, something super simple, probably like Bitcoin, although it wouldn't have to be. It could be more like complex or something, but just a simple sort of like privacy first Bitcoin. And then I had like a lesser amount of conviction, but still a high amount of conviction that Zcash would be that the winner there. But it could have been Monero, it could have been something new, whatever. I didn't really care or know, but I am just I cannot believe that there is not like a privacy first basically large coin. And so anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on this. So one is like I don't know like where like privacy plays a role. I think it's going to be like figuring out how much people care and when they care. I'll give you like one observation I have is like, so I mentioned we've had like, it's like 18,500 people create Moxie accounts. They're connecting their X, they're connecting their Farcaster, they're connecting their LinkedIn, their GitHub, they're connecting their wallets. Now, do I think there are some people out there, and I said that people are freely, adding this information, right? Do I
Right.
think there are some people out there who would be maybe hesitant to connect some of their wallets because they don't want everyone knowing everything that they're doing? Probably, right? Have we seen it materialize yet? No. Like literally people are connecting wallets that I'm seeing have like hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars like in value to them. And but so I do think though there could be a very interesting play. Let's say so we've seen let's say like copy trading on interface. I
Yeah.
think there's a play that you could see where let's say with something like Moxie, where you're able to, if you're someone's fan, so if you paid a certain amount of money, you can get access to their wallets that they don't make available to everybody. That so they
Mm,
like a ZK proof to kind of show that this is their wallet. Even we Moxie don't know it, but you know that they made this trade. That I think could be an interesting use of privacy. Um,
yeah.
and so I think but it's going to be somewhere how you like take the user control of it, simplify it, dumb it down, and make it a place where it's a pain point where like on a certain extent, like, some people might want to brag, but they don't want the whole world knowing everything. And they also might want to make some money. And so you can blend those things. And how does that kind of materialize? And that's where I think some interesting things. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that is an interesting like potential app basically, or at least like a feature for Moxie, like you said, potentially, or something else. Um, and I guess the question for me is like basically from the beginning, people were like using Bitcoin for like online transactions to do shady stuff. And so it was like, regarded as something that was like sort of safer than, using a credit card or whatever. And I think this like sort of early reputation sort of masked the fact that like it's a public ledger and like and not just Bitcoin, but like all of these chains, like all of your transactions are public. And so the question to me is like, if you don't want something private, it's basically like, I think you're sort of signing up for, this may or may not like come to be in a literal sense, but like, imagine if you go to someone's Twitter profile and there's a tab for their posts and there's a tab for just like all of their, let's say they use like a Visa credit card. It's got like all of their credit card transactions. And then there's like an AI search at the top that you can be like, what is this person like, where does this person live? Like, what is this person, where is this person likely to be on a Monday morning? Like all of these like really weird things that like having someone's full financial data is super sketchy in my view. This is something that like, Chase Bank might have.
Yeah.
But like,
You would be
and
shocked though at like how much people actually put out there. But yeah, I think there's a difference between like what you're comfortable with the world knowing and then what you keep more private for sure.
yeah, so we'll see where it all, ends up, but it's just like it's like 99.99% to 0.001% in terms of like pub default public blockchain activity
Yeah.
versus private, and I just can't believe that that's the balance that we're at in 2024.
Yeah.
But who
So
knows? There might be something to it as well that like regardless of the application, I think privacy is just because you were talking about like you don't think a non-social network's going to work. This is obviously like more of a non-financial transacting ability or whatever, and so it's like there might be something to it that just people just don't really care as much. Like people claim to care and they just don't really. And I myself am no exception from this in that like could I have much better privacy practices in the way that I sort of like operate online? Like definitely. But I think I'm more so than most, but like I when push comes to shove, you want to do something on the internet, the default is to do it in a relatively non-private way. You just do it. It's just kind of how it goes.
yeah, yeah. So let me tell you about some things that we're working on that are like where we're headed with this and somewhat related.
Yeah, yeah.
So um we're really excited about the convergence of AI creators, fans. I don't know if you know the right name for the yet, but it's like AI agents for real people. And one of the things that we've been working on, which is showing a lot of promise, is so one is let's say if there's people that you admire or you look up to in kind of social world, and today if you want to kind of very quickly get a sense for them across, let's say, what they're doing off chain and on chain, you got to do all that yourself, like the different places, right? And so an
Mm,
AI agent that helps you get that like in a second, and collapse it, and then to have super agents that cut across that. So like, okay, the 50 people that I'm a fan of, here's what's happening now.
mhm.
And so that's something that we're working on and very like showing great promise on. And then I think then feeds to like the next part of like what we're just talking about, which is, and then like depending on what level of fan you are, those people could also have certain aspects that are only available to those those levels, right? So you say, okay, like you can get access to my wallets that are public under my ENS and these ones, but if you want to know what's happening with these other wallets, then you've got to be, let's say, a fan at like the $1,000 level, whatever it might be. um
Right.
and and then you can copy trade me or you can follow me and I'll get some percentage of it. But like so we're working on things in that area, and I think it's AI is going to make all this stuff feel like it's so much easier and just so much more user friendly than it's ever been before. And like what we can do in like a couple seconds right now, it like would take people manually like, a few hours to piece together and still not have a full sense of it.
Is your sort of expectation that, or the goal that fan tokens will roughly be like the token for basically every individual on the internet? Obviously, like not
Yeah. I
literally
mean,
that's like a huge number of people, but basically like the people that you get, like, is the idea that this is their personal token, not just some like sort of Moxie intrinsic thing, but like this is the token for people. And if you sort of like them and think that they're going to be more successful in the future, you go and buy their fan tokens? Or is it sort
yeah.
of an offset that's more related to, special perks like within, the Moxie, within Moxie built products and features?
No, I think it's the former. I think it's like the goal is that, just like, people today, they follow, people based on whether they're influencers, they're creators, they're athletes, whatever they are, and they get certain value by following them. That the next generation of that is, it's basically fan tokens for people, and by being a token holder, you get certain, value and benefits as well, and that's what we're working towards. And then there's value created across the whole system that you can, use things like AI to capture that were almost impossible before. Yeah, well,
Are
we're like it's like sometimes we call like creators and influencers, but really it's like it's like
just people?
people exactly, and brands, people,
Yeah.
people, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess not necessarily individual people. It could be brands, entities, basically. I guess. So anyway, I know we're coming up on time, but I am curious, and then take some time. Anything else that you want to mention that we didn't get to, obviously. But my last sort of question is like in regards to. I feel like I feel like this is more than just, moving from Farcaster focus to more broadly. I feel like this focus on like creating tokens for all individuals and other entities like companies or brands or whatever, and like having people be able to invest in them as fans. Like, I feel like it is a reasonably significant shift from how Moxie launched, and it all makes sense given all the factors that you mentioned. You can't know who's going to win the election. You can't know various things that happen, and so taking the new information, making these adjustments, I think it all makes sense. But are there any sort of prior experiments more in this realm of like sort of investing in individuals, or basically what you guys are trying to build now, the most useful sort of like precedents or comparables where you can either learn from things that worked or learn from things that didn't work? Are there examples within crypto or otherwise that have been the most informative or most interesting to you, or are you guys operating from more of a from scratch basis and there's not too much relevant for what you guys are trying to do?
I said, let me just like respond to the first part. Is that when we launched Moxie, we said our primary bet was, could we be a catalyst for a continued kind of growth of Farcaster at a moment when Farcaster was really in a negative growth phase. Like the summer was really bad for Farcaster. Like it's kind of like there was the degen boom, and then it was like really like the air kind of let out of the balloon. And for the first month, it really worked well. Like it was like the amount of engagement of Farcaster grew by like 150% during the first 30 days of Moxie. But it wasn't enough, right? But we were placing the first bet that we were placing was like, if could we just basically be a catalyst for Farcaster growth, and they'll just grow within as Farcaster grows. We're one of the we're in symbiotic with
Right.
it. And there was always kind of like, and then the part two would be, if do we need to then expand beyond Farcaster or what, or that kind of thing. And and what we did is we just, for all the things we talked about earlier today, is we flipped the script, right? We saw, because of the election, because of kind of the bull market, because of all the the rise of base and all this other stuff, we said flip the script. Let's just go the other
Yeah.
direction.
And the growth
yeah,
engine is not a thing anymore. It's just on
yeah,
the other side of the equation, basically.
exactly. And but like we couldn't have done, like we couldn't have flipped that script if we didn't first go through the experience we had, right? So
Right.
we brought so much was already built that we were able to kind of bring with us. We also like, we could have done it without like partnering with Privy, like they've been essential to this, right? If Privy didn't exist, like the stuff that we're doing on X with AI just wouldn't be possible. and working with talent and like the basic stuff. So, like there's so many pieces that come together that make this possible at this moment in time. And then I still, it's like I have not in any way given up on Farcaster. I want Farcaster to be the place, but I also have a responsibility to build, a multi-billions worth of value for everyone involved in Moxie, and I'm going to go wherever I need to make that happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then so to and that's definitely a better sort of framing than how I said it. It really is sort of a flipping of the script, where it's expands beyond Farcaster now as a means towards growing Farcaster rather than growing with Farcaster and maybe expanding later. Um, what about that other piece around, informative projects that have existed, maybe failed before, or, are existing and succeeding now? Anything in particular that you're drawing from, or nothing that sort of stands out?
I'd say we're at this moment in time where you always want to say like, is there anything that we don't learn from previous things? But like, yeah, I think Mark Andreessen has said this over and over again. Is like if you look at like the .com crash, almost like 99% of the ideas that came out of the .com crash actually became good businesses the second or third, fourth time around. It just at building the right product at the right time. But like, and I think it's like learning what you apply new technology with a kind of a glance toward what's been done in the past, but mostly focus on creating something new that people need. I will say with AI, it's much harder to just like say, okay, well, ask users what they want, because users don't even can't even comprehend what's possible. So it's more, I think you're now in a mode of you build something, show it to people and see how they react and try to build in POC very quickly, frankly, versus the previous model might have been find something people need and build towards that gap. Now it's like find something that you can make 1,000 times easier, better, or that which wasn't possible before that people might want because of AI, and jump on it, prove it, and then show people and see how they react to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. I've always been sort of skeptical of this idea with consumer products anyway, that people even know what they want anyway. And now in a world where a lot more is possible and difficult to foresee, it may even be more so the case, to your point.
Yep.
So anyway, appreciate all the time. It's been great talking with you as always, and looking forward to seeing how Moxie continues to evolve from here. And yeah, keep up all the great work, and wishing you all the success.
Awesome. It was a great conversation. Really appreciate it.